Exciting day today. We're gonna try to start this beast. Now you don't think it's just gonna start, do you? Newsflash, this is a 40-year-old car that was completely taken apart by an absolute moron. Something isn't gonna work, but we're gonna get through it, I hope. Okay, so we're not getting any fuel pump action here. This car comes with a 2-pump system. I'm gonna simplify that and make it only 1 pump that's in the tank, hopefully. You access the fuel pump in the trunk. There's a cover here that's 3 screws to remove. And then years of dirt and grime and dust, so we took the vacuum out and tried to vacuum all that stuff out to make sure that it didn't go in the fuel tank. Not that we know what's in the fuel tank or whether it's any good. There are 2 electrical connectors on here, one for the fuel level sender and one for the power to the fuel pump. So we removed those. Then we removed the hose clamps for the fuel line and the fuel return line, and removed those hoses. And another quick vacuum to make sure that all the dirt is out of there. There are 4 nuts that hold in the fuel level sender, and you have to remove the fuel level sender before you can remove the pump out of the housing. But of course I didn't know that, so I removed all the bolts on the fuel pump housing first. Lots of vacuuming and cleaning to try to make sure that no dirt or debris falls in there. Once I removed all those bolts, I figured out that it wasn't coming out without removing the fuel level sender. So after a little more vacuuming, I went ahead and removed the 4 bolts off the fuel level sender. And with a little screwdriver, I was able to kind of pop that fuel level sender up. And it is just a metal cylinder that slides out. Once that's removed, the fuel pump just barely has enough room to get pulled right out of there. You want to make sure you don't drop the sock down in there. Then I spent a little time trying to clean up this part to make sure it looks just a little better than it does right now. Scraping out dirt and grime and cleaning off all the rust and everything else. Then I used a little sandpaper to remove more of the rust. Once I had it all pretty cleaned off, I went ahead and removed the wiring and the old fuel pump. And once the old fuel pump was removed, did a test fit of the new fuel pump, and it does kind of fit in there just the way it's supposed to. I took the old rubber off of the old fuel pump and put it back on to the new fuel pump. Measured everything out to try to make sure it was about the same distance, and it appeared that the new fuel pump hung just a little bit lower than what it's supposed to. So I went ahead and marked up the housing, cleaned it all off, and then used a Dremel to cut a little bit off of that fuel line so that our new fuel pump would fit in there properly. A little file to make sure that the edges were clean and there was no debris inside the hose. And I went ahead and fit up our new fuel pump, made sure that it was the same level as the old fuel pump. Turns out we needed another round of Dremel to make it just a little bit shorter. But this time we got the fuel pump fitting up perfectly, and it ended up lining up exactly where the old fuel pump was. Now all that's left is to wire this thing up, get everything all attached and connected, and we use some zip ties to hold everything together, put our new sock on, and it is ready to go back into the car. And it goes back in basically in the reverse of how it came out. So we squeeze it in there, and it is a very tight fit. put our fuel level sender in there and screw everything down. Reconnect our hoses, clean everything up, and then get the wiring all set in there. Put our cover plate back on with those 3 screws, and now we can move underneath the rear of the car, and you can see the rear axle is right there. In this shot you see our fuel filter and the second fuel pump. That is the high pressure fuel pump. Use a little WD-40 to loosen everything up, and we're going to go ahead and remove all of this stuff. Now this second fuel pump is not going back in, so I needed to come up with some attachment hosing that would eliminate it. It does go from a larger hose to a smaller hose, so we had to come up with a little metal contraption that was going to go across both. And here I removed the fuel filter. We're going to go ahead and replace this. And this is the contraption that I came up with to go from a larger hose to a smaller hose. And I'm just sealing it all up with Teflon tape, getting it all as tight as I possibly can. We stick that in there, and that is basically going to take the place of the second pump. Push it in there, put our hoses back in, and then we're going to route it around and put our new fuel filter on there. Get all the hoses cut up to the proper length, and then we'll go ahead and zip tie everything into place so it's not bouncing around or chafing or moving or doing anything that it's not supposed to do. Now we have a completely new fuel pump, and hopefully that's all we need. Now we're having a problem because the fuel pump does not appear to be functioning. So yesterday I terminated the second fuel pump wires to make sure that none of those were grounding out, and then I went and pulled the fuel pump and checked all the connections, rewired it, put it back in after I tested it to make sure that it actually was a working fuel pump, and the fuel pump is working fine and it's wired correctly and everything is good, which means that we have a bad fuel pump relay, or at least that's what I'm assuming. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just figuring stuff out. So when I rewired all the relays in the front of the car, it's pretty likely that I burned something out, which, who knew? I didn't know what I was doing. I was just rewiring it. So the fuel pump relay is probably bad, but we're gonna find out really quick with some testing. We're gonna jump the fuel pump relay and make sure that the fuel pump then turns on. And if it does, well, then we can at least check for leaks, and then maybe we could start this car. This is our fuel pump relay, and you just basically run one wire to another terminal on the fuel pump relay, and it jumpers it, so it always has power instead of switching it over, which is not happening because the relay is not switching it over. So we're just jumpering it so it always has power. Now you don't want to leave it this way, but to test it, it's not going to really hurt anything. Okay, so we figured out we jumped the fuel relay to get the fuel pump running. So theoretically, we should be able to start this thing. Yeah, here goes nothing. Now we got no spark on the engine. Could be a bunch of things. It could be something in the ignition, but since the car's turning over, that's probably not it. It could be the coil, but I did test it out and it should be good. That leaves the position sensors located in the transmission housing. Now there is a way to actually test these things, but you need an oscilloscope to do it. I don't have one, so I had to use the process of elimination and just hope that that was the problem. Replacing these things is a serious job. These are the two sensors that are mounted in the transmission. This sure would have been a lot easier to replace these when the transmission was on the floor of my garage for all those months. But hindsight is always 20/20. And they worked when they were last in the car. So I had no reason to believe that there was any reason why these wouldn't work when they went back in the car. But obviously, that is not the case. So each of these is held on by one nut, and then you just have to pry them out. And pry them out is what you'll spend a lot of time doing. I used lots and lots of WD-40 and all sorts of tools in the process to try to remove these two sensors. This is what is left of those two sensors right here. And these are the tools that I used to actually extract those sensors from the car. We used this punch, this socket, these, the hammer to try to punch it out. We drilled it out a little bit. We used some PB Blaster to try to wrench it out, and inevitably, after 15 hours of work, those sensors became these sensors. And just in case you're wondering, these are the new ones, and that's what they're supposed to look like. So we went from that to that. Now, I don't have any video of the install of these things, but let me just tell you how it went down. See, the reason they're so hard to remove is corrosion. When you put an aluminum sensor up against the steel housing of the transmission, it's a recipe for corrosion. So those holes that the sensors go in, well, they're a lot smaller than when the transmission housing was cast. And of course, I didn't fix that issue before trying to install the first set of sensors. So, of course, they broke going back in, and I had to spend about the same 15 hours removing the brand new sensors once they were in and order another set. Then I spent a few days using some corrosion removal solvents and that sort of thing from the mounting holes, and by the time the new sensors showed up, they slid right in. This was probably the hardest job that I had to do on this car. And just for fun, I decided to replace the coil too. That way, we have no excuses for not getting spark. So let's test it. I did test the old coil, but it's really simple and not very expensive to replace these. The new coil is a bit smaller, so there had to be some adjustments made in order for it to fit. So I used a piece of rubber to shock mount it and some tape to make sure that the rubber was going to be seated in there properly and not move around a whole lot. And once this process was finished, we went ahead and remounted the coil back into the car and did a very quick test with the spark plug against some metal to make sure that this thing was sparking. You can hear the fuel pump running. We just tested and we have spark. Let's see if it starts. I'm skeptical, but let's see what happens. Neutral. Put on the clutch. Here goes nothing. Oh my God! And it's idling perfectly. I did it! I know there are probably a lot of people who thought it would never happen, but it just happened. Wow. It's running. Not perfect, but it is running. Now, like I said a lot on this channel, I am not a professional mechanic, but I just removed an entire engine, redid it, and put it back in with not much more than this cheap Stanley tool set and a couple of borrowed tools. Why spend all this time on an old BMW 733 that's not worth anything? Well, it could only be for the love of cars. And if this moron can figure it out, I know you can too. So pick up that ride that you always wanted and figure out how to make it run. It is pretty rewarding. And you know what? I'll see you guys in the next one.